Watching my daughter-in-law, Brenda, stand in my living room, barely a month after my daughter Sarah's funeral, felt like a violation. Her eyes weren't filled with grief for her husband's sister, but with a speculative glint as they scanned the room, lingering on the antique sideboard Sarah had loved. "Of course, Mother," she'd said, using that sickly sweet tone she reserved for asking for money or favors, with Sarah gone. "Well, this big house is far too much for just you, isn't it? Especially now." Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe families should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. The implication hung heavy in the air, that with my daughter's passing, I was somehow less capable, less deserving, and certainly less needing of the home I'd shared with my late husband for 40 years. This house, where I'd raised my children, where Sarah had taken her last difficult breaths, was suddenly, in Brenda's eyes, available. It was a chilling illustration of how quickly some people move from mourning to maneuvering, a cold splash of reality after the devastating warmth of sorrow. It forced me, numb with grief, to confront a new kind of pain, the dawning realization that my own family saw me as nothing more than a source of money and assets, waiting to be harvested. But what she discovered next would force her to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. My life, before the darkness descended, had been one of quiet contentment and generous provision. After my husband passed 15 years ago, he left me comfortably situated, specifically ensuring the house was mine, free and clear. He knew how much it meant to me, and perhaps, with a foresight I now appreciated, he knew how important it was for me to remain independent. I had always been a giving mother. My son, David, a pleasant but somewhat feckless man, had struggled financially over the years, and I had helped him out more times than I could count. Down payments, school fees for the grandchildren, even covering debts Brenda had run up. My daughter, Sarah, had faced her own challenges, particularly with her health later in life, and I had devoted myself to her care, often having her stay with me in the very house Brenda now coveted. Sarah's passing had left a cavernous void, a silence in the rooms that still echoed with her memory. I was 68, financially secure, perhaps a little weary, but certainly not frail or incapable, despite Brenda's thinly veiled suggestions. David and Brenda lived in a modest home across town, always complaining about expenses, but rarely showing any initiative to improve their situation. Brenda, in particular, seemed to view my home and my savings as a sort of communal family fund, accessible upon demand. There had been smaller instances over the years, hints about needing a new car, pressure to fund a lavish family vacation, disappointed sighs when I said no to frivolous requests. But these had always felt like minor annoyances compared to the deep love I had for David and my grandchildren. I had, perhaps foolishly, always given them the benefit of the doubt, attributing their behavior to financial stress or simple thoughtlessness. One evening, a few weeks before Sarah's death, when David and Brenda were visiting, I overheard them from the kitchen. I was making tea, and their voices carried from the living room. "She can't keep pouring money into Sarah like this," Brenda hissed, her voice sharp. "It's ridiculous. All that money could be ours. David, your mother isn't thinking straight. We need to talk to her about securing our future." David mumbled something noncommittal, his usual response to Brenda's more aggressive plans. "The house too," Brenda pressed. "Once. Well, you know, it's the biggest asset. If we could just get her to put it in both your names. Or agree to sell and downsize and give us a chunk for a bigger place. She's getting older, David. She won't need this much space forever." The tea tray clattered in my hands. My stomach churned. They were discussing my assets, my home, my future, as if I were already gone, or worse, as if I were merely an obstacle to their inheritance. The casual coldness, the calculating tone, sent a shiver down my spine. Was this what they thought of me? Was this what my generosity had bred? Entitlement and greed. I managed to compose myself, returning with the tea as if I'd heard nothing. But the seed of doubt was planted. I began to notice more, the way Brenda's questions always circled back to my finances, the value of my home, my retirement accounts. I started keeping a small notebook, jotting down dates and times, small incidents that had previously seemed insignificant but now glowed with a new, sinister light. I didn't know what I was documenting yet, only that a sense of unease was growing, a feeling that the ground beneath me was shifting. The death of my beloved Sarah intensified everything. Grief was a heavy blanket, muffling my thoughts, making me vulnerable. David was upset, of course, but Brenda's immediate focus shifted entirely to practical matters, dividing Sarah's few possessions, talking about memorial costs, and how I should cover them, and then, chillingly quickly, back to my house. The incident, Brenda's comment in the living room, wasn't just a casual remark, it was the opening salvo. The very next day, Brenda called. "Mother," she purred, "David and I were thinking. It must be so hard for you here alone now. We were thinking maybe we could help you pack up some things? Get the house ready? You know, for whatever comes next." "Whatever comes next?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Well, yes," she said brightly. "Obviously, you can't stay there by yourself forever. It's far too large, and frankly, the upkeep must be a burden. David thinks you should consider selling. Downsizing. Maybe moving into one of those nice assisted living places." Assisted living? The suggestion landed like a punch. I was perfectly healthy, fully capable of managing my own home. This wasn't about my well-being, it was about freeing up the asset. "I have no intention of selling my home, Brenda," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "This is my home. I am quite capable of living here." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Oh, well," David thought. "Maybe you hadn't really thought it through yet." With everything, her tone shifted, becoming slightly aggrieved. "We're just trying to help, Mother. Thinking of your best interests." The blatant disregard for my wishes, the immediate pivot to best interests when their initial suggestion was rejected, solidified the awful suspicion that had begun to fester. This wasn't concern. This was planning. That night, I pulled out the metal box where I kept important documents. I found the deed to the house. It was clearly and unequivocally in my name. My husband had handled everything correctly. I held the piece of paper, a simple document representing not just a building, but my security, my independence, my memories. They wanted to take this from me. Tears welled up, not just from grief for Sarah, but from a profound sense of betrayal. My own son, influenced by his wife, was willing to push me out of my home less than a month after his sister's death. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I was too raw, too hurt. But the denial had evaporated. I saw their intentions with a painful clarity. My first defensive action, born of instinct and a rising sense of self-preservation, was small but significant. I located the original deed and other critical financial documents, making copies and placing the originals in a safe deposit box at the bank the very next day. It felt like hiding treasure from pirates, a grim necessity. The innocence of grief was replaced by a cautious vigilance. The pressure from David and Brenda escalated rapidly. They began calling daily, sometimes multiple times, always circling back to the house. "Have you thought any more about what we discussed, Mother?" "Aunt Carol agrees it's too much house for you." They enlisted other family members, subtly spreading a narrative that I was struggling, that the house was a burden, that they were simply trying to help by facilitating a sale and managing the proceeds. For my benefit, one afternoon, my sister-in-law, Susan, called, her voice hesitant. "Mildred, David called me. He's worried about you. Says you're not coping well, refusing to even think about making practical arrangements. He mentioned the house. Says he's concerned you might make hasty decisions." The manipulation was clear. They were building a case, portraying me as incompetent to justify seizing control. I listened to Susan, thanked her for her concern, but quietly corrected her, stating I was coping, managing my affairs, and had no plans to sell. It was exhausting, fighting this invisible battle on multiple fronts. I continued my quiet documentation. I saved every text message, every email. I started using my phone's voice recorder discreetly when they called or visited, capturing their relentless questioning and increasingly demanding tone. I felt a growing anger, cold and steady, replacing the initial shock and hurt. It was time to seek professional help. I made an appointment with a lawyer specializing in elder law and property rights, recommended by a friend from my book club. Sitting in her office, explaining the situation, the rapid escalation after Sarah's death, the focus on the house, the pressure, the attempts to portray me as incapable, felt strange, like recounting a story about someone else. The lawyer, a sharp, compassionate woman named Ms. Evans, listened patiently, reviewing the copies of texts and notes I had brought. "This is classic financial elder abuse," Ms. Evans stated calmly. "They are attempting to manipulate you into giving them access to or control over your primary asset under the guise of concern for your well-being. The fact that they are doing this so soon after your daughter's death is particularly egregious," she explained my rights clearly. The house was solely in my name, provided I was deemed competent, which I clearly was. They had no legal claim to it unless I voluntarily signed it over or they could somehow prove I was unable to manage my own affairs and needed a guardian. A difficult and expensive legal battle they likely hoped to avoid if they could just pressure me. She advised me on immediate steps. "Do not sign anything they give me, change the locks on my doors, consider changing my will to explicitly exclude David from inheriting the house, or any substantial assets if they continued this behavior, and issue a formal cease and desist letter regarding the harassment and property discussions." We discussed the concept of a life estate or transferring the deed while reserving a life estate, but Ms. Evans agreed that given the current situation, maintaining outright ownership was the safest course. They couldn't turn the deed against me if I already held it securely and defended my rights. The phrase from the title wasn't about them turning my deed, but about me using the security of my deed to turn the tables on their plans. I left Ms. Evans' office feeling a sense of grim determination. I wasn't helpless. I had rights, and I had a plan. The knowledge was empowering. The next time David and Brenda came over, uninvited, their demeanor had shifted again. Seeing my resistance, their sugary concern had morphed into thinly veiled irritation and outright demands. This was the second antagonist cameo, raw and undisguised. "Mother, we need to be serious," Brenda stated, planting herself in front of me. "We simply cannot afford for you to be sentimental about this house. It's tying up capital that David needs to provide for his family." David stood awkwardly behind her, his face a mask of discomfort, unable to meet my eyes. "David needs to provide for his family by working, Brenda," I replied evenly, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. "Not by taking his mother's home." "Taking? That's unfair," she snapped, dropping the pretense entirely. "We're talking about your future. About making sure we, your only family left, can look after you properly, in a smaller place, maybe closer to us." "I am looking after myself properly," I said. "And I don't need a smaller place, nor do I need to live closer to you if this is how you intend to behave." "So what, you're just going to hoard everything?" she accused, her voice rising. "After all we've done? After all the times David helped you out?" David had rarely helped me out. I was usually helping him. "All the times I helped you," I corrected softly. "I have been very generous. But my generosity does not entitle you to my home or my savings." "This is ridiculous," she fumed. "David, tell her. Tell her this isn't fair." David finally spoke, his voice weak. "Mom, maybe just listen to Brenda? She has good points. It's a big house." "My house," I repeated, looking directly at David now. "Purchased with your father's hard work. Securely in my name. With no mortgage. There are no good points about forcing me out of my home." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Fine, if you want to be difficult. But you can't stay here alone forever. People talk. Maybe someone should look into whether you're really capable." The veiled threat of questioning my competency hung in the air. This was the moment. The absolute confirmation of their malicious intent, the willingness to use legal means or social pressure to get what they wanted. My resolve solidified into concrete. I would not be moved. Acting on Ms. Evans' advice, I quietly changed the locks on all the doors and had a security system installed. I consolidated some bank accounts and added Ms. Evans' contact information to key financial files, noting that she had power of attorney for financial matters if I were ever incapacitated, a safeguard, not a transfer of control. I drafted a new will, making specific bequests to my grandchildren that would be held in trust until they were older, and left David a token amount, with the bulk of my estate, including the house, designated to charities I supported. It felt harsh, but necessary. They had chosen money over our relationship, and this was the consequence. Then came the smoking gun. One afternoon, while visiting my sister-in-law Susan, the one who had mentioned David's concerns, I found a crumpled piece of paper in her recycling bin. It was a printout of an email from Brenda to Susan, forwarded from David. The subject line read, "Strategy re-mother's house." The email outlined their plan: convince me to sell, get me into assisted living, then pocket the majority of the proceeds, claiming it was reimbursement for years of support and managing her affairs. It discussed how to portray me as forgetful and overwhelmed to other family members, and even mentioned looking into the cost of filing for guardianship. It was all there, laid bare, the calculation, the lies, the intent to defraud me. Holding that email was like holding a weapon. It was irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. I immediately made copies and sent the original to Ms. Evans. This document, combined with my meticulous notes and voice recordings, gave Ms. Evans the leverage she needed. We had the evidence of their malicious intent and their plan to manipulate me legally and financially. The legal weapon I acquired wasn't a complex one. It was the simple, undeniable fact of my sole ownership of the deed, now backed by ironclad evidence that their attempts to challenge it were based on manipulation and deceit. Ms. Evans advised me to take decisive action to stop the harassment and make it clear I would not be intimidated. The counter-strategy was simple: use the law to enforce my boundaries and protect my property without unnecessary confrontation until the legal action was underway. David and Brenda, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the shift. Their calls continued, though less frequent and more demanding. They were overconfident, certain that their persistent pressure and spreading of rumors would eventually wear me down. They spoke as if my downsizing was a done deal, asking about specific movers and even suggesting paint colors for the new place they assumed I would buy near them with my money. They were so consumed by their entitlement that they failed to see the quiet preparations I was making, the legal steel hardening behind my polite refusals. They thought they were playing a game of wills. They didn't realize I had already consulted the rulebook and was about to call checkmate. The climax was not a shouting match or a dramatic courtroom scene. It was quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Acting on Ms. Evans' advice, I sent David and Brenda a formal letter via certified mail. It was concise and direct. 1. Acknowledge receipt of their communications regarding my home and finances. 2. State clearly that I had no intention of selling my home or changing my living situation. 3. Inform them that their continued harassment and attempts to pressure me constituted undue influence and financial elder abuse. 4. Note that I had retained legal counsel and was aware of my rights. 5. Include copies of the email printout and transcribed voice recordings as evidence of their intentions. 6. Demand an immediate cessation of all communication regarding my property and finances and cessation of spreading false information about my well-being. 7. State that any further attempts to pressure, threaten, or interfere with my affairs would result in further legal action, including but not limited to a restraining order and potential legal action for harassment and attempted financial exploitation. 8. Crucially, it stated that given their recent behavior, I would be limiting contact and would not be providing any further financial assistance or discussing future inheritance. The letter landed like a bomb. I wasn't there to see their reaction, but I received a torrent of frantic, angry messages. First disbelief, then rage, then attempts at damage control. Mother, what is this? This isn't you. How could you accuse us? We were only trying to help. Brenda was particularly volatile, sending messages laced with insults and false accusations. David sent a few bewildered texts, asking why I was doing this. I did not respond directly. Miss Evans had instructed me not to. Instead, she sent a follow-up letter, drier and purely legalistic, confirming I would pursue all available remedies if the harassment did not cease immediately. This legal action, founded on the undeniable proof of their conspiracy via the email and recordings, firmly secured my position. They could no longer gaslight me or others about their intentions. The evidence was laid out. My quiet act of securing my deed and preparing my case had turned the tables completely. They had zero legal ground to stand on, especially now that their manipulative intent was documented. Word spread quickly through the family, aided by Ms. Evans who, with my permission, discreetly informed key individuals about the legal action and the reasons behind it, backing it up with selective details from the email. The narrative David and Brenda had tried to build crumbled. Shock and disapproval rippled through relatives who had previously been swayed or pressured. David and Brenda were in a state of panic. Their attempts at desperation tactics were pathetic. Brenda tried calling friends of mine, spinning wild tales of my supposed mental decline. David even showed up at my door once, tearful and remorseful, pleading with me to talk it out and withdraw the letter. But I stood firm, the hard-won resolve holding me steady. David, I said, keeping my voice calm but unwavering, I have nothing left to discuss with you about this. You chose your path. Now you must live with the consequences. I closed the door gently but firmly. The deed was done, both literally and figuratively. My home was safe, my boundaries were set, and their scheme had failed spectacularly. Alone in my quiet living room, the silence no longer felt empty with Sarah's absence, but full of a new kind of peace. The legal letter had stopped the onslaught. Brenda's angry messages eventually ceased when she realized they were only building a case against her. David sent a few more texts, half-hearted apologies mixed with resentment, but I didn't reply. The court action was minimal, simply filing the letters and evidence with the local court as a formal record of harassment and intent, a procedural step Ms. Evans recommended to solidify my position and deter future attempts. It wasn't a full-blown lawsuit, but it was enough. It made their intentions public record among those who needed to know and shut down their ability to claim ignorance or pure motives. David and Brenda faced the quiet consequences of their actions, isolation from many family members who were appalled by their behavior, and a permanent severance of their relationship with me, and crucially, access to my home and finances. There would be no inheritance from me, no handouts, no more enabling. My new boundaries were absolute, no visits, no calls, no exceptions. It hurt, yes, the loss of the relationship with my son and grandchildren was a deep wound, but it was a wound inflicted by their choices, not mine. I walked through my home, touching the familiar furniture, looking out at the garden. It was mine, truly mine, secured not just by paper, but by my refusal to be exploited. I had protected my home, my independence, and my dignity. There was no grand victory parade, only the quiet satisfaction of standing up for myself, armed with patience, documentation, and the unwavering proof of a simple deed and a greedy email. My future was my own again, built on quiet strength and hard-won wisdom. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.